All right. Hello, everyone. Excited to have you here with myself and Matt Coates talking expert talent sourcing and retention strategies. So, really, how do we find and identify the right hire, and then how do we retain them post hire? Excited to have you all here. We'll give it a couple more moments for people to jump on, and then we'll start with some introductions before kicking off the content.
Great.
All right, I think we're all likely trickling in. So, to kick it off, of course, this event's hosted by Insight Global. Insight Global, we're one of the leading staffing and professional services providers. So, anything from your classic temporary hire, direct hire, as well as some advanced services that we provide both here in the US and then globally as well. Here today, you have myself and Matt over a digital office, which is a dispersed office across the country. I have been in the recruiting space for about 7 years, variety of different capacities between recruiting, sales, and marketing. And right now, oversee retention strategy for a digital office. So how are we finding the right talent, and then how are we keeping them happy and performing well in their roles? And then Matt, I'll kick it over to you to introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. Thank you for having me here. I am a sales manager on our digital services team. I started off in professional recruiting, and I was a lead recruiter for about the last 5 years, and now help kind of our inbound team and a lot of inbound customers. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here. I am excited to go over our content today.
Awesome, great. So, how I'd love to do this, or how we'd love to do this today, is to guide you through really what we think about through each process of identifying the hire, sourcing the hire, interviewing, and then onboarding and retaining after. Um, so, I think a lot of this really starts within the screening process, right? So, what exactly does it mean to evaluate priority as hiring manager, right? So if you're a hiring manager and you're thinking, okay, I need to hire a Java developer for this project coming up, there's a few different things that you need to identify and realize with yourself before you move forward. Matt, I know you guide this through your team of 10 plus. I'd love to hear your pulse on
Yeah,
really.
yeah, definitely. No, thank you, Rebecca. I always think, and I'll kind of put it from the manager's point of view, but the very first place to begin kind of your, do I need this person is probably like also when do I need this person? I think that's a really good place to start, especially when leveraging an agency. I think you really just want to have that targeted in is, can I hire this person right away, or do I need them in a quarter from now? So really narrowing down the priority in terms of timeline, I think is very important, especially if you're going to engage an agency like ourselves. We are always here to answer questions about, how we actually go through our processes and begin recruiting as soon as you need us. But I think there's probably different strategies around if you are looking to hire somebody now or if you're looking to hire somebody 6 months from now. So I think just figuring that out first is probably a really good place to start.
Totally. Yeah. And I think about that in the scenario of actually a question our director on Matt and Mike's team frequently asks customers and us when we're hiring is, at what point do you reach critical capacity that the hire needs to happen now? And I see that materialize in a couple of different ways. When I'm personally working with clients is maybe we have a position open, right? Say you're hiring for a help desk technician. And we're interviewing and the interview process, wrangling feedback from your stakeholders, the other people in the interview process is taking a long time, right? And you thought this hire was going to be wrapped up in 2 weeks, but it's really been a month or two of the process. I always like to consult and say, look back at what you think that might mean for the actual priority of the role. Are we really at critical capacity quite yet? Sometimes you don't need to reach critical capacity, right? You still need the hire right away. But I think it's just a good thought exploration related to the stat here. 66% of employers reduce skill gaps by hiring. Which scenario do you fall into? Do you fall into that 66% where you do need this person to fill this gap, or can you reassign some people that are on your team and cover things that way? I think uncovering that really shows yourself and your team one, how to justify the budget because you've already seen that, hey, we can't address these gaps with our current team. Or two, if you can you use that headcount maybe on somewhere that's more pressing or something that might transform the business in a different way? Really asking yourselves those kinds of questions when you think about evaluating priority as a hiring manager before you even start the recruiting process.
Yeah. No, I love that. I was going to delve into, and this is kind of a theme I'll probably bring up a few times over the next few slides, but um, also being the manager, and you are the person that's obviously deciding, okay, what is the skill set that we are trying to hit here? What is the skill set we're maybe lacking on our team? And laying out very strictly, okay, what are the requirements for this job, and understanding like what are the things that really needed to be in this person that we're about to hire. What are your non-negotiables for their skill set? And we obviously, very, as in terms of being on the agency side, harp very much on somebody's resume and what those skills are in a candidate, and that's something we vet out very closely. But then on the other side of it, there's also all the intangibles that you want to make sure that you know what you're looking for. So I think of a customer of mine that I used to have where they would always say, okay, we're pretty loose when it comes to the skill set, but when it comes to how far away they live from the job site or our office, that's a non-negotiable for us, and they can't live more than 20 minutes away from our office. And it's because in the winter the roads get really bad, and we want to make sure they get to work on time. So when it comes to things like that, and maybe your budget is maybe more loose or tighter than this role or another role. And there's just so many things that kind of go into hiring somebody that's not on their resume, and understanding that about where you sit as the manager, and kind of what flexibility you have in those things is also really important to understand as well. So it's not just about the skill set; it's also about everything else that goes into it.
Yeah, totally. And, where are you willing to bend? Where are you willing to break? And where are you not willing to do either? Is so important before you even get into the sourcing process, because then it opens up a candidate pool to a true representation of what you would be willing to hire and who you would want to work with. Matt, to your example, sometimes, there's a big cultural gap. There, we need somebody with leadership experience, somebody that can command a team versus somebody with every single must-have requirement on the job details or the
Definitely.
job description, if you will. And I think that kind of lends into the next topic is how do we evaluate the right hire right from the search,
Yeah.
right from when things start. And that's hugely important. Of course, after you figure out your priority, justify that this role is the right role to fill at the right time. Then you move into, okay, how do we evaluate candidates? Matt, you've been like one of the most
Mhm.
successful professional
Yeah.
recruiters in the company prior to moving into the sales management role. And you've been assessing candidates left and right for years. What really like made you successful in thinking, okay, how do you assess if they actually are the right
Yeah,
fit?
I think a really good gut check for everybody to have, and kind of say to themselves, is finding the all-star perfect candidate, or let's just say the perfect candidate, is really difficult to do. And kind of changing your parameters of like what an actual perfect candidate is. It may not mean that if you have 10 skills or 10 must-haves on somebody's resume, having all 10 of those must-haves, and then they have all 10 of the intangibles, they have the salary range, they're close to the office, they're okay coming in Monday through Friday. Finding that person that checks all those boxes is almost impossible, if not possible. And so I think, like, especially what our job is as a staffing firm, or myself as a recruiter, my job was to find that candidate that maybe they check 7, 8 of those skill set requirements. But then when we look at the intangibles, it's, hey, they're really close to the office. Like, they're really excited about coming to work because it's only a 10-minute commute for them. So do you think we can bend on maybe these other one or two, hard must-have skill sets that you were looking for? Or maybe on the other hand, it's maybe you have a larger budget and somebody shows up and they're actually outside the budget, but they're the most experienced. They've been in the industry, they're very qualified. They were basically doing this job at the last company they worked for, but they're $30,000 over budget. I think it is your onus as the hiring manager to decide, hey, what are the things that I can actually bend on. I think, and then when you're leveraging a staffing agency, you might get a few of those resumes where it's easy to say, well, this person doesn't have everything I need, and want to skim over them. But I think it's our job as recruiters to call those 20 people that are 30 people that are in the market, and then provide those best options for you all to see. So yeah, I think it's to summarize that, it's really hard to find that perfect candidate, and you just kind of have to know what you're willing to maybe sacrifice or lean into and not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think the most successful recruiting partnerships and client partnerships, whatever you want to call them, that I've had a really strong understanding of who they are as a company. So then when I'm in these scenarios, and you can also think of this from the lens of if you're the hiring manager or if you're the recruiter, I
Sure.
know we likely have folks that are anywhere ranging from a 1 to 2 person firm up to a enterprise level company, right? You have different levels of support, whether you have a dedicated recruiting team, whether you have a staffing firm or a staffing services company like ourselves, or whether it's just you hiring, right? How do you make sure that you have such a strong internal compass of who the team is and who they are, who the company is and who they aren't, so that when you talk to somebody or you see a resume that might have 7 out of the 10 requirements, or maybe even 5, but you see they come from the same industry, which means that the knowledge transfer time and the ramp up time would inevitably be
Yeah.
shorter, and it might be more advantageous to teach those hard skills
Right.
and have that industry experience. That's just one example, but being able to navigate that nuance when looking at a resume is so important. And the only way that you can do that is to prioritize and assess the priority in that first step that we talked about. So then you can leverage any resource you have, whether you have our team of 75 offices, or if you have you and your one recruiter, you can figure out how to prioritize the true values behind just the resume,
Absolutely.
um, which lends to, what if the resume is only telling part of the story, right? I think that's a really important thing to focus on. And, a lot of people that are recruiting haven't been recruiters for, a combined 20 years, or however long it's been for us, Matt. I think,
Yeah.
you know, you can still identify what you're willing to bend on early, so then you can recognize it in a resume and just do pattern
Yeah.
recognition time.
Yeah. No, this is something that I'm really passionate about after looking at thousands of resumes over the years. But it's a really easy trap to fall into, and we talk about this a lot of time. Recruiting all day, where looking at somebody's resume, it's really easy to assume that is their full story, or their full background in a particular role, and that's kind of like a trap, right? It's sometimes people don't know what they actually need to have on their resume, or maybe a software or a tool that they've been using every single day for 5 hours a day, that they're very, very expert level with. They don't know to include that on a resume. So again, it's kind of our job to call these individuals that might look like they have the appropriate skill set, and just ask them, like, hey, have you ever used this software? And then sometimes you get that resounding yes, like, I use it all the time. And then it's, why is it not on your resume? And it's really important to remember that resume writing is a skill, and it's not something that's really taught usually, very frequently. So just remembering that, and kind of understanding that, hey, just because it's not on their resume may not mean they're not even intermediate or advanced level in that particular skill, and they just didn't know to write it. So I think that's a really good thing about using, especially our services, is that's something where we can call and ask them. Or if you're a manager calling resumes, like, just because it's not on their resume, make sure you ask them if there's a software you use internally. See if they have it. They might have it, and they just didn't list it. So yeah, it's just kind of, it's just resume writing is really hard, and it's not something that's usually talked about very often.
It's such a good point. And I think, I also think about the accessibility of resume rewriting services. There's a lot of AI tools and automated things that can get your resume on paper. But when it comes to the actual content and meeting with somebody who understands resumes to break down your job experience to write it in a resume so
Yeah.
keywords can be picked up, just because
Right.
somebody has that type of service and cost to pay for that service accessible, doesn't necessarily mean that their resume or their experience is higher quality than somebody that doesn't have that. So that's where, it can leveraging a recruiter or consulting with somebody that has experience in the industry can be really important. Because if you think about, and I feel like I've been falling on software development a lot, so I'll use a marketing example. Say you want to hire a director of digital marketing, and you're looking at resumes and you see somebody that has the right industry experience, the progressive experience, and they have launched products, but you don't see the term go to market strategy in the resume. Chances are they're going to be worth a conversation, because if they've launched new products as a director, that you can infer that they have launched a go to market strategy. That's something that you have to determine and discern in the conversation, right? But so to say that the likelihood of that being part of their experience is strong because of the foundation that it requires to get to that higher level. So I also think those kinds of assumptions and thought processes are really important when you're narrowing things down.
Yeah. Which is something, just to echo that, I mean, it's something you just brought up is you find out those things in an interview. And that's always our biggest advice is just, I would say, interview more rather than less. And, be careful of, again, just if you don't see it on the resume, like, maybe just have that conversation and have a phone interview or a Teams interview and just ask them about it, because they might just be able to explain themselves a lot better than on paper.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've both been in scenarios where we'll either be hiring ourselves or we'll be working with clients helping them hire. And they'll interview somebody that has all the cultural fits they need, all the soft skills, some, but not all of the hard skills, aka the
Yeah.
technical skills that you need to succeed in a job. So the feedback is, I really love this person. I think they would be great in our team. I think we could make it work, but I do want to interview more people just to see if we can get somebody that has everything, including the hard
Right.
skills. And then 3-4 weeks later, they come back and say, we actually do want to hire this individual. And there's a high likelihood that they've been lost to another opportunity at that point. Not always, but frequently. And it just comes down to, being able to read through that and use reference interviews, but not be fearful of making a decision because you think that there's a better thing out there. Like Julia,
Right.
you said in the comments, it's like finding a unicorn to find a candidate that meets all of the contract requirements. And that's true. So, the bend and break thing is really a common theme throughout this. I think it's also interesting, this stat, the 60% of hiring managers say that a candidate's cultural fit is the most important factor in the hiring decision. Once again, that just expands beyond the technical skill sets of what you see on a resume. And if you are in a position to lean on a recruiter or lean on a staffing firm or a team that's specialized to do so, I think like really sitting down with them and giving them the time to explain what your team's culture is and what you want the
Mhm.
culture to be, maybe where the gaps are. Like I mentioned, you have someone with leadership experience in a previous example. Being able to deliver that to the recruiter so then they can offload a little bit of this responsibility of assessing what's outside of the resume, can make the hiring feel a lot less daunting if you have the
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's an easy thing to lapse over when asked. Obviously everybody wants to talk about, well, what are the skill sets you're looking for? What's the software you guys use over there? And then how much are you guys paying, or what are the working hours? But I think it's also really great to advertise, like, what is your team like? What is the culture like? I don't know. Like, I mean, I think those are just like minute details that even telling your agency partner can use to actually advertise the role when they're talking to candidates, and that will just make your job ever more appealing. So, yeah, really kind of an easy thing to overlook, I would say. But looking for a new job is, there's a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah, it always goes both ways, just to make sure
Yeah.
you represent your brand to them, to bring in the buy-in, which really leads to
Yeah.
making the offer, right? So you found the right person, and it's time to make the offer. How do you do that in a way that, one, adds value to the candidate that's being offered, makes them feel like their needs have been met, they're excited about the role, they're bought in, and then on the converse, ensuring that the budget's there to make that offer, et cetera, et cetera. When I think about making an offer, I think about the culmination of everything we've talked about so far. So obviously the glaring stat, 42% of candidates have declined a job offer because of a negative interview experience. That goes all the way back to assessing priority, right? Like, are we just going to run somebody through the interview process and then delay the offer by 6 weeks because we're not in alignment internally on timeline? that happens sometimes, and that's okay. But doing everything you can to avoid that, I think, is one, you owe it to candidates that are potentially going to be accepting the offer, and two, you owe it to yourself for the time management aspect of it all. But beyond that, it's how do you present yourself in the interview? Are you regularly communicating with them? Are they getting detailed interview feedback? All of these things, um, you know, you have to think about when you end up at an offer stage. Begin with the end in mind is something I always like to say, and that's really important as you go through the interview process, just to set yourself up best for success here. In
Yeah.
addition, obviously, to the timelines.
Yeah, out of everything we've gone over, I think this is the most important thing from your point of view as the hiring manager, to put yourself in the, the interviewee's shoes, or the candidate's shoes. And um, I get this last point here: verbal offer versus written offer, and following the kind of the timeline of that. Making sure that if you are considering getting a written offer out to somebody, which, if you're a larger company and you have to go through your HR channels to get that sent over, and maybe that takes a day or two, I think it is very important to giving that security to a candidate. They are probably interviewing for numerous jobs. And if you are the company that says, hey, we're going to be sending you a written offer, I want to make a verbal offer to you, and here's what's going to be in that written offer. I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think that's going to give your candidates some security that, that you're interested in them. I think the wrong thing to do, on the other hand, is probably sitting on that, not communicating it. And of course, it's one thing if you have other candidates that you're interviewing, that you're taking through the process. But I just don't think there's anything wrong with instilling a little bit of security in, these people that have taken their time out to come interview for your job. That if you're going to make an offer, letting them know that, or even the latter, letting them know if you're not going to make an offer, just so that they know what the process is like. That first stat, I think, kind of echoes when they don't feel secure, and then maybe they have another company that is expressing interest and wants to interview them, and maybe they just don't know that you were planning on giving them an offer, so they're going to keep interviewing with the other companies. So there's really nothing wrong here with over communicating your intentions, and there's kind of like a lot that can go wrong if you don't, to be honest, because they might just keep interviewing for other jobs and you'll miss out on them.
I agree. And it's so easy to get lost in kind of the day-to-day of your own job, because of course hiring is an additional responsibility to what you're already doing. And you're hiring to try and offload likely some of the work that you are covering if you are understaffed as a manager. So it's easy to let 4 or 5 days go when you're lost in all of your meetings and not realize that there hasn't been any communication. Week will go by like nothing for you, but maybe to a job seeker that's been interviewing for multiple places for 6 weeks, 5 days is a very long time. So those specific timelines of communication, as best you can after the final interview. Hey, thanks so much. We're interviewing a few other folks, or we're seeing a few other folks throughout the process, however you'd like to word it. We expect to have feedback by this week, or let's plan to touch base in 2 days. If an offer is coming, just like you said, Matt, hey, we are intending to pose an offer to you. If you know the salary, say that so they can start, let the gears turn in a little bit. And say the written offer will likely come in 4 to 5 business days because of a system that we have in the back end that generates our offers. Or, say, hey, we're ready to make an offer. We can have it in your inbox at the end of the day today. Can we meet tomorrow to talk about it? Just really giving them the time of day is going to be so important. One, to make them accept the offer, but two, to just have a positive experience with your brand in general.
Yeah, one of the things we also do on our end is kind of, this is in regards to that middle bucket, is really understanding, even during the interview process, where that candidate is at in their interview process. So just because they're interviewing for your job, it's kind of a candidate's market right now. There's a lot of good talent that a lot of employers are looking to acquire. So I think it's really great, and something that we do to take care of our customers is understanding where the candidates are at in their interview process. So they're interviewing for your job, and then they have 6 interviews the rest of the week. You probably want to know that. So maybe we have some backup candidates or some other options on the table. Like I said, there's everybody's kind of interviewing, and they probably have a lot of options. So I think it's okay to ask, hey, we're really intending on moving forward with you and bringing you to that final interview. Where are you at? Do you have any other offers on in hand, or do you have any other interviews this week? And just kind of being able to understand that process, so maybe you can expedite your process, and get them through quicker if there's somebody you're interested in.
Yeah, and I think just building that relationship throughout the interview process so they have a positive
Right.
experience really
Yeah.
makes them being candidates so much more willing to share candidly where they're at.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, once you reach an offer stage, understanding, okay, if this is where you're at interviewing elsewhere, this is the offers you have on the table, this is maybe the salary differential, all of that information, you as a hiring manager, you as an HR professional recruiter, whoever can take that back to the table and understand, okay, if a counter offer needs to be made, which negotiation is very frequent, especially in permanent roles, what's all the information we have to make the best counter offer that is both respectful but respectful of your internal budget too.
Yeah.
And it's just once again it falls down on that communication, and that doesn't stop once the offer is signed too. I think the onboarding process and then the retention process is so important. And I say onboarding, we mean anywhere from when they sign the offer to when they start, when they walk in the door, when they log in as an employee for the first time, and then retention being their employment thereafter. Excuse me. So myself, I oversee our retention strategy for our office, and it's so clear to see unsuccessful and successful onboarding strategies falling back on communication and
Mhm.
just cadence of communication. Um, when we our process internally, or not internally, but what we do with our customers is once we identify a candidate and they accept the job, we make sure that we're communicating with them at least once a week, but ideally more than that, to just give a no update, or your start date's going to be this, I found out some more information about this, let's schedule an orientation or whatever meeting it might be, to keep them in the loop. That cadence of communication starts from the interview process all the way throughout when they start. And making sure as best you can that your onboarding process is established, meaning, okay, you've signed the offer, wonderful, here is your background check, here is your onboarding information to get your direct deposit set up, the logins that you're going to have on your new laptop, here's how to set them up, those kinds of logistical things. Once they have a background check submitted, they have company equipment, that makes them a lot more bought in, because candidates understand, okay, this process is truly moving along and I truly am going to start, which is so important to retaining them.
Yeah, yeah. Putting it bluntly, it's you do all this work to interview somebody and go through all the candidates to find the right person, and then, um, I think there's a little bit of loss of going into that point of like, hey, we just gave you an offer, you're starting in 3 weeks, great, see you in 3 weeks, and there's just again, there's a lot of uncertainty that can arise during that period. So we really focus on after that initial offer is accepted. It's not the job's not over for us, most certainly, and it shouldn't be for you as the hiring manager either. I would say it's maybe even more important to focus on the person at that stage, because you had just gone through so many steps to find that perfect person. Do you really want to lose them because maybe they get another job offer? So um, I know that like our processes that Rebecca just spoke about are really revolved around making somebody feel really secure about this opportunity that they're going to be starting maybe the next week or maybe the next month, and just ensuring that they know what is coming up and what to expect on their first day and when are they getting that equipment that Reb mentioned. So yeah, I again, we just did so much work to find that perfect person, and you just don't want to, you want to make sure that's taken care of.
Yeah, and a lot of folks that I speak with and work with, once you've gotten through the interview process, you've gotten the offer signed, you're ready to onboard them, thinking about building an onboarding process and building a retention process can feel so daunting, especially if, you're a two-man show working on a shoestring budget, you don't have all the resources in the world to create that for you. It doesn't have to be the most sparkly type of presentation ever, right? Like you can build an onboarding program where it's a Word document of communication about, this is what you need to get from IT, this is what we will be sending you, this is when we can communicate again. And then once they've onboarded, having weekly check-ins, or hey, you're going to be learning our systems on week 1, you're going to get access to the ticketing system week 2, week 3 your goal is this. Something that can be very simple, but it can give an individual direction when they're joining a new company, because it's inevitably going to be a culture shock. It's going to be a working style shock. It's going to be a task shock. Things are going to be different inevitably, no matter how successful of a transition it is from one job to another. So I think enabling somebody with just the security of knowing what's coming next, even if it's not perfect, goes so far in making somebody feel bought in and knowing within the first month if it is the right job for them.
Definitely. Definitely well said.
Um, yeah, so I think that's all we have for you today. So really, to sum it up, I think we talked about bend and break a lot, communication cadence, and just making sure that you're thinking of the end in mind all the way from assessing priority to make sure that each step is ran as respectfully and as efficiently as possible, barring there's always extenuating circumstance. You can never fully account for every single aspect, but putting in the effort to really build a process and build a communication pathway is going to be huge for identifying the right talent and keeping them.
Definitely.
So now I would love to open it up to Q&A. I see in the audience some questions already coming through. I'll give it a few seconds, maybe 15 or so, for y'all to get your questions in. And then we can start answering. But I appreciate all these questions so far. All right. I see one we'll start with. How do you tackle the industry issue of candidates getting ghosted? This is actually a great one. I'm glad somebody asked this, because I dealt with an interesting situation I want to share about this. So regardless of industry, candidates deal with getting ghosted by hiring managers or recruiters or staffing agencies or whatever. And it's, of course, a very poor experience. At Insight Global, we have standards internally where we're monitoring how often we're communicating with candidates, ensuring that feedback is getting sent to them on their interviews or whatever performance feedback, whatever it is, in a timely manner. So we have systems in place that really ensure that we are having that level of candidate communication. We also have years of data that show, say you haven't touched base with somebody in 3 weeks, they have a much higher likelihood of leaving for another job. That helps us dictate, making sure we systematize how we talk to people or how often we talk to people so nothing slips through the cracks. However, I will say that nobody's perfect. And I want to share a story I actually got recently. I won't say his name, of course, but it was a candidate I was working with. Excellent candidate. He went through the interview process for a role I was supporting. And the role ended up going a different direction, and he wasn't going to be the candidate selected. And with everything else going on, I had a few things going, running at the same time, and I kind of let it slip through the cracks, and I didn't reach out to him. He actually reached out to me saying, "Hey, getting ghosted made me feel this way," and it was a really big reminder and a wake up call. I actually sent it to my leaders and was like, "Hey, this is such a good reminder of how prevalent this is in the industry and how it affects people." So I think for us, me personally, and for Insight Global, it's adhering to the standards that we keep for our brand and making sure that we are giving the best level of service at all times, but always being receptive to feedback. So as a hiring manager, being receptive to hearing, okay, maybe on Glassdoor or maybe on your review sites, you're seeing that people are commenting about candidates getting ghosted at your company. How can you impact that as a hiring manager? You can make sure you talk to all the candidates you interview. It doesn't have to be the company wide. It can just be what's within your control. And then beyond that, as a candidate, don't be afraid to give that feedback in a respectful way. I think that's really important to helping this issue, and it helps people listen and then obviously improve their behavior.
Yeah. And
Kind of
giving
a
that,
tangent. There's a lot in that.
and giving that feedback, I think people just want to know, even if they're out, why they're out. And I don't think you're always going to have that answer. And especially if we're the middleman and having to pass that feedback along, we may not have the exact feedback to why they're not a good fit. But if you can tell somebody, hey, this is why you're not a good fit, it's because of this, and this. I think people can either grow from that, or at least they'll just understand maybe for the next role they apply to, what they could have done differently, or skills they could enhance, or whatnot. But I think if you know the answer, you might as well tell the individual and help them in their journey to find a new job.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Josh, I see one from you. How do you measure the effectiveness of talent acquisition and retention efforts? This is a really interesting one because it totally depends on what your goals are and what the goals of the partner are. For us, it can measure anything, of course, from hires, time to hire, resumes produced, interviews that happened. Everybody's KPIs or goals, if you will, are different depending on what they want. Obviously, the hire is always going to be the gold star, but we use a lot of data to infer, okay, what's the candidate pool in this location for this skill set, realistic timeline. And then for us, it's always making sure we come through on our promises. So if we say we'll have 2 candidates, qualified candidates ready to interview within 3 days, that's something we hold ourselves to.
Yeah.
With
Okay.
retention, no, I was just going to say with retention, we have all kinds of data and reports and meetings and things. But Matt, I'd love for you to answer that, because I know that you've worked on retention a lot with your team and had some pretty incredible strides just with how you hold your
Yeah.
people and
Yeah.
then
And
retain.
I was gonna echo off the first point too. Just my favorite stories from when we have our somebody reach out to us and maybe they've never used a staffing agency. My most memorable stories of helping our customers is when they let us know, we've been trying to fill this job for a year or for 6 months. What can you guys do? Like, this is kind of our last ditched effort to fill this role. And then we fill it. Those are always like the most slam dunk type, I guess, examples of utilizing talent acquisition or agencies to fill a role that maybe has been struggling to fill for the last year. So that was just my story about that, which happens more than you would think. And then just in terms of retention, we have a lot of processes at Insight Global that are weaved very adamantly through our culture and our values. And what I would say, Reb, is like, I think it is very well known within Insight Global that our job does not stop once we find that perfect person. And it's maybe only just the beginning. So if we have a customer reach out to us and say, hey, I want to hire somebody for a year-long contract, and we go through all the work to find somebody, and our hiring managers interview them and offer them the job, that's kind of the beginning of the next job for us, which is making sure that that person is taken care of and they feel comfortable and heard in their new job. So I think we spend so much time at Insight Global really focusing on those things, and how do we ensure that these people that we have working for us are enjoying their work and growing in their job. And we have systems for one-on-ones with managers to kind of do those performance reviews. And I would say that's probably the most monumental thing when it comes to retention is just going through those steps. Because if you don't go through those steps and you don't know where the problems are arising for that person and they're not being heard, then they're probably going to go look for another job, or they're probably not going to be successful in their job and may be let go. So I think it just starts with that, is just really digging in with that person and making sure they're invested in.
Yeah. And Josh, in terms of actual measurement, of course, I'm not sure exactly what your professional circumstances, but for Insight Global, we have a pretty mature brand evaluation progression where everything that Matt said about the performance evaluations, the consistent communication, the customer service calls, all of these things when it comes to retention ultimately lead into our Net Promoter Score, or NPS, which is an industry standard term of how likely are you to recommend this company to friends or colleagues. And that's how we gauge our ultimate success, because we're putting thousands of people to work every week. We have to systematize it in a specific way, but that's all based on a survey. So our NPS score is over double the industry average because of all the systems we've put in place. But a great thing to do if you don't have access to create this mature brand evaluation program is start sending surveys, automated surveys. Maybe SurveyMonkey doesn't have to be an expensive subscription, to the people you interview, and anonymous surveys to your current employees. And that'll give you really, really tangible feedback on how to evaluate how your strategy is actually working from the candidate side. Because I think that feedback will really help inform like your best strategy for improvement or keeping things consistent. But it all comes back to survey. It all comes back to feedback.
Yeah, well said.
I think those are all the questions we have. So we will, oh, I didn't even get us to Q&A. I'm sorry. So we will call it at this point. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. I really enjoyed this conversation, Matt. I thought this was really fun.
Yeah.
Excited to hear what you guys think. If you have any, or you're interested in Insight Global, you can navigate to our website, insightglobal.com. There are lots of buttons for you to click hire somebody, and then you can talk to either myself or Matt directly. And we'll also put our meetings links in the chat if anybody wants to schedule some time. Once again, just sincerest thank you. Really, really stoked that y'all joined us for the day. And hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions. No, thank you so much for your time and listening to what Rev and I had to say.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.